Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. Think about this for a second. India has individual states with populations literally larger than most major European countries. It's just mind-boggling, right? Now, it's super easy to just look at the national capital when you're studying a country, but the truth is, the real engine of India's democracy operates within its incredibly diverse and fiercely competitive states. In a nation bound by a common constitution, political behavior still varies wildly across these regions, mostly because of some really profound social, cultural, and economic diversity. So we're going to unpack exactly how state governments, political parties, leadership, and center-state interactions actually function on the ground. To really understand the world's most populous democracy, we have to look past the capital. Here's our roadmap for today. We're covering the rise of state politics, the frameworks of political power, federalism between the center and states, caste and ethnic identities, unequal development and reforms, and finally, the politics of land. So starting right off with Section 1, the rise of state politics. We're looking at how India transformed from a single-party giant into a highly competitive battleground. Imagine an India entirely dominated by just one political party. Well, right after independence, the Indian National Congress had such absolute, sweeping control that the scholar Rajni Kothari actually coined the term one-party dominance to describe this totally unique phase. Even though opposition parties technically existed in the background, the Congress Party remained overwhelmingly dominant across the board. But, singular control rarely lasts forever. Eventually, cracks started to form. During that post-independence era, often called the Congress system, things seemed stable. But then in 1963, a strategic move known as the Kamaraj Plan ended up exposing some pretty deep internal weaknesses within the party. And that specific moment was a real game changer. It triggered the decline of their absolute dominance, completely opening the floodgates after 1963 for the rise of fierce, highly competitive regional parties. Suddenly, the political arena totally transformed into a vibrant marketplace of local identity and development. We saw the rapid rise of powerful regional players. A few excellent examples of this shift are the Dravida Munnetra Kazhagam, the All India Trinamool Congress, and the Aam Aadmi Party. These aren't just names on a ballot either. These parties fundamentally reshaped everyday lives, language rights, and local economies, proving without a doubt that strong regional leadership deeply influences political behavior. Moving right along to Section 2, Frameworks of Political Power. Here, we're analyzing exactly how state power is structured and exercised. To unpack how state power actually operates day to day, we can look at it through two distinct lenses. First up, we've got the institutional approach. This focuses heavily on the formal constitutional structures. So the legislature making the laws, the executive branch led by the chief minister and governor enforcing them, and the judiciary interpreting them. But flip that coin, and you have the political economy approach. This shifts the focus entirely to how raw economic factors, things like development, wealth inequality, and the actual physical distribution of resources dictate the real political outcomes on the ground. Okay, let's jump to Section 3, Federalism, Center versus States, looking at the division of powers in India's quasi-federal system. At its core, federalism simply means the division of power. And in India, this takes the shape of a constitutional rule of three. The Constitution directly divides powers into three buckets: the Union List for major national issues, the State List for regional matters like local police and public health, and the Concurrent List where both sides get a say. This creates a quasi-federal system. What that means is states absolutely have their own specific domains, but India intentionally maintains a very strong central government to keep the whole thing tied together. Now, in practice, this federal setup takes two wildly different forms depending on the political weather. On one hand, you have cooperative federalism, where the system works through smooth, effective coordination between the center and the states to get massive national projects across the finish line. On the exact opposite end, you have conflictual federalism. This one is characterized by ongoing friction, legal battles, and sometimes pretty bitter disputes between the two levels of government. And a real-world example of this conflictual federalism is playing out right now. As our source points out, there are frequent, high-profile disputes between the central government and opposition-ruled states under the Bharatiya Janata Party. It really clearly shows how deep political differences can turn that constitutional federal structure into an arena for intense friction rather than pure cooperation. Let's pivot to the human element in Section 4. Caste and ethnic identities. We'll be examining the social hierarchies and cultural identities that actually mobilize voters. To understand the true meaning of identity politics here, we absolutely have to look at caste and ethnicity as these dual, deeply ingrained forces. And to be clear, these aren't just ancient social concepts studied in history books. They actively shape modern political behavior today.
Caste hierarchies literally dictate local voting blocks and candidate selection, while ethnic identities drive intense demands for regional autonomy.
To really grasp the mechanics of this, you have to understand specific mechanisms, like the creamy layer. It's a pretty fascinating policy concept. Basically, it's designed to exclude the more socially and economically advanced members of the other backward classes, or OBCs, from receiving government reservation benefits. Knowing these specific rules is totally essential to understanding how representation is legally structured and how caste-based parties successfully build their platforms to advocate for marginalized groups.
Similarly, ethnicity, which is an identity strictly based on shared culture, language, or religion, plays a massive role in state politics. It leads directly to identity-based movements and sparks the creation of regional parties that actively demand autonomy. But we also have to acknowledge the darker, more turbulent side of this force. While it successfully mobilizes voters, it can also tragically fuel deep ethnic conflicts and severe instability, as we have heartbreakingly seen in places like Manipur.
Let's move on to Section 5, Unequal Development and Reforms, focusing on the material impact of state politics and regional competition.
So why do some states pull ahead with futuristic infrastructure, shiny tech parks, and booming economies, while others just fall behind? Well, it comes down to a clear set of causes driving these regional disparities. We're looking at historical factors that gave some areas a massive head start, plain old geography and access to ports, fundamentally unequal policies over decades, and, frankly, the sheer quality of political leadership. This really matters because highly uneven growth directly leads to mass migration and turns economic development into the ultimate make-or-break election issue.
Now, a massive historical pivot happened in 1991 that basically changed everything for these states. During the pre-reform period, India suffered from agonizingly slow expansion, popularly known as the Hindu rate of growth. But the post-1991 LPG reforms completely flipped the script. By introducing liberalization, privatization, and globalization, India shifted into a highly competitive, market-driven economy. Suddenly, states had to fight tooth and nail to attract private investment, which completely shifted the political conversation toward growth and modernization.
And for our sixth and final section, we're looking at the literal ground beneath these states, the politics of land, reshaping rural power dynamics, and political participation. Historically, the progression of land reforms was explicitly designed to protect farmers and systematically dismantle rural hierarchies. It happened in key steps. Step 1 was the abolition of the zamindari system, which finally broke the grip of wealthy, aristocratic landlords. This moved directly into Step 2, the actual physical redistribution of that land to the people working it. And all of this was driving towards Step 3, the ultimate goal to radically reduce inequality across the vast agrarian landscape.
A perfect historical example of this grassroots effort is the Budayan movement, led by Vinoba Bhave. This initiative pushed wealthy landowners to voluntarily redistribute their land, which profoundly changed who actually held power in rural areas. And you might be wondering, why does that matter today? Well, because by giving marginalized farmers a physical stake in the land, it permanently increased their political participation at the local level. It literally shaped the rural voter demographics we see right now.
As we pull all of this together, the big picture of this explainer becomes incredibly clear. We've seen that while federalism provides the overarching constitutional skeleton, it's the vibrant, often turbulent mix of deep-rooted caste identity, ethnicity, highly uneven development, and staggering regional disparities that truly flesh out the political body. These forces shape state politics by directly influencing local economic conditions, turning up the heat on political competition, and forging the complex, highly localized governance patterns we see today. I want to leave you with this final, crucial question to consider about the world's largest democracy. As India continues its massive, market-driven growth, will the ancient ties of caste and ethnicity continue to dictate state politics, or will the raw, undeniable demand for equal development and modern infrastructure completely reshape the nation from the states up? Thanks for joining me in